On the now that we're on the topic of sex, all these questions uh just blow everything wide open, because our listeners have sent in all these sex specific questions, because again, it's taboo,
Sure.
and most people feel like they don't have anyone to uh, talk to about this subject, or they don't have anyone they can ask questions um, for these. So we got a question sent in here from Chantal Charon. She says, the high level of stress I experience on a daily basis often contributes to low sexual desire. I want to have sex and enjoy it, but I need to get out of my head. Any tips or tricks to help ease this mental barrier?
So I love that she recognizes that she's in her head and not in her body. So desire is in your body, pleasure is in your body. So that makes sense if she's in her head why she's having low desire. I would look at what kind of a libido she naturally has. Is it spontaneous or is it responsive? Spontaneous is you could be going out for a walk with your dog and all of a sudden you're like, I just really want to enjoy my partner right now. Or receptive is, or responsive, sorry, is I feel absolutely nothing. But as soon as my partner and I start making out and fooling around, now I'm like game on. So I would look at what type of libido you actually have. Then I would also like self-care is number one for a woman. Number one, a woman will not function at her highest if she does not have some form of strict commitment to self-care. If you're not eating enough calories, getting enough sleep, moving your body, getting outside, breathing fresh air, feeling sunshine, stretching, breathing exercises, journaling to get it out of your head and onto paper. Breast massage is really good for getting into your body. Doing the presence exercise, you can even do that with fruit. Like use that as a practice, or something like your favorite food. If you don't have time to go out of your way to do that when you're eating. Like when you're eating lunch or eating dinner, like pay attention, get off your phone, don't talk, just smell your food, feel your food, taste your food, look at your food, be playful. This will get you out of your body, which will start to regulate and calm down your nervous system. And then you'll start to notice there's more energy. But it sounds like she might be, if they're depending on how much stress and what type of stress, there could be a little bit of burnout, which when you're in survival mode, I can tell you that our body doesn't know the difference between a grizzly bear attacking us and our boss being a jerk or like tension in the relationship. So think about it this way: when you're getting attacked by a grizzly bear, the last thing you're thinking about is like, how can I love on my partner, right? Like your body does not want to have a desirable libido when it needs to protect itself from being attacked by a bear. So that's where it's like, okay, you've got to recognize, where are these threats coming from? How can I neutralize them as much as I can? And then how can I take care of myself? Alone time, losing it on a pillow, like having bent up energy and then just crying and punching a pillow to release it from inside of you, and then bringing the attention back, even if it's just with a warm cup of tea. Like bring it to your mouth, feel it on your chin, feel it on your lips, feel it in your mouth, smell it, feel the warmth in your hands. Like we can do it with the things that we do in our normal day. When you're in a shower, what does it feel like as you feel the hot water dripping down your body, as you're putting lotion on your legs? Like we don't have to go out of our way to create some crazy ass practice that takes a lot of time. It's bringing the presence into the day to day, but also having a commitment to self-care. If you're not eating enough and you're staying up late, waking up early, like your body is a human. It's like asking a car to drive without gas. If you're not taking care of it, giving it its oil changes and giving it the gas it requires, it's not going to work. It's going to break down. So it's like, what as a human being do you need to function at your best? And that looks different for different people. And understanding your hormones, especially as a woman, and where she's at in her menstrual cycle. Tracking her menstrual cycle will also help a lot. So self-care, understanding your menstrual cycle, getting out of your head and into your body with like presence practices, and then understanding what type of libido you have. Because maybe she does have a libido, but there's no contact with her partner. So she just feels like she has no desire, but that's because her and her partner aren't touching each other to create it. So those would be my tips to that question.
What kind of conversations should couples be having when it comes to sex, and how many times a week do you think is best on average for couples to have sex? I mean, it's not
I get that
zero and it's
question
probably not
so
seven,
much.
and I'm sure it's dependent on each couple, but have you found with all the clients you've worked with that there's a sweet spot, whether it's once or three times or something?
I wouldn't say I found a sweet spot. I just find the sweet question is that I've been asked that question thousands of times,
I guess
probably
people just want to know if they're normal. Like if they're having
100%.
sex once a week or once a month or six times a week, people just
Yes.
want to know, is that normal or is
Am
that
I
not
normal and am
normal?
I okay? So the biggest thing is, one, are you happy with it? And is your partner happy with it? If both partners in the relationship are okay, then you are having enough sex. If one partner is not, then there needs to be a conversation, right? About what's going on with that. And if there's compatibility and what can create more, right? Or less, depending on what it is the partner's needing to speak about. The thing is life is cyclical with all different types of cycles within it. So you could be with a partner that sometimes you're having sex 5 times a week. And then there's 5 weeks that you don't have sex at all, depending on what's going on, depending on illness, depending on injury, depending on pregnancy and birth, depending on stress, depending on so many things. And this, I want to say, is both a man and woman thing. This is not just usually, because it's usually the woman has an issue, therefore, then she makes the situation where they're not having sex. That's not true. Like there's a ton of men right now that are not having sex with their partner because, one, they feel emasculated, because that's how women have, and this could be a whole other podcast, but women, we have been very conditioned to be emasculating in order to be strong and independent and essentially protect ourselves. So there's a lot of men that don't want to have sex with their partners after a certain time because the desire is neutralized, the polarity is neutralized because of emasculation. Stress over money, over work, long hours, all of those things. So it's both men and women, and both men and women have different libido styles. So most men have spontaneous, most women have responsive, not all though. So sometimes you'll have a man with a responsive and a woman with spontaneous, and the woman's like, I don't understand. I want to have sex all the time, and he can have sex once a month and be okay with it. So I think neutralizing that this is a man versus a woman thing, it's not at all. It's cyclical, that sometimes you're going to have lots and lots of sex and sometimes you're not, and that's okay. The only thing that needs to be present is the willingness to have conversation about it, right? At the end of the day, if you're both happy and you both feel content and satiated, then you're good. If one of you isn't, then there needs to be conversation. And there needs to be conversation regularly anyways to make sure that you guys are on the same page. And I always recommend couples at least once a month having a sit down conversation to talk about like what's working in the relationship and what's not to berate and bring down the other person, but to be like, I loved this. This was incredible for me, or I struggled with this, or I really recognize I'm craving more of this, right? Share expectations, communicate expectations, and then ask the other person if they're capable of fulfilling that expectation. Breakdowns in relationship happen all the time because there's a ton of expectations that are not communicated, and then the other person gets in trouble for not following through on the expectation that wasn't communicated in the first place, and then obviously was not agreed upon because they didn't even know the expectation was there in the first place. And that goes with sex, like bedroom and out of the bedroom, for everything. So communication is number one. Not comparing yourself to anyone else because you have no idea where they are in their cycle, because they may be having a ton of sex when you're not, and then all of a sudden they're not having sex when you are. So it really does not matter. It matters that what are you doing and how are you being? What's it like for your partner? And what kind of conversations are there so that you could both hear each other's needs, requests, expectations, and come to a common ground that works for both of you. So you both feel seen and supported in your requests and your needs.
In your experience, have you found that what turns women on is very different than what turns men on? I remember hearing that with research, it's like if you ask guys what turns them on, it it's like they're thinking about being with multiple women. And then when you ask a woman, it's more about the setting. So it's like, oh, I'm by a fire, and I guess it's completely different. I'm wondering if that's what you've experienced working with different people.
So that is, how do I say this? So that's not total, that's not that when you actually speak to people behind
Is that a
closed doors,
misconception?
100%. So a lot of men have been taught that what makes you guys men is to have a lot of women. There are a lot of men that may have some sort of arousal to the possibility of being with lots of women. The majority of men that I've worked with, spoken to, and know personally don't, right? There's a lot of men that are super happy being with one woman, and as long as there is an active life, like sex life, then that's fine. There's also a lot of men that I know that thought that this would be a turn on and went and had like a season of singleness where they were with lots of women or had many women at one time. And they were like, this is not nearly as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. So I want to definitely kibosh that's not true at all. So first of all, a man can be aroused. Arousal is different for men and women. So one, recognizing your libido, whether you're the responsive or spontaneous, and two, understanding. We also have to be mindful that just because a woman's got natural,
It's so complicated.
but a woman is not like, it takes a woman on average 18 to 45 minutes to become aroused. Now, that's where the setting, the environment sometimes works, because that is contributing to foreplay. Foreplay is known mostly as like oral and fingers and stuff like that, which it 100% is, but sometimes like sassy texts throughout the day, or hearing a voice note specific about you and your body or what's going to happen, or the
Music.
environment. Music, yeah, music for sure, especially if it's like a song when you guys first met and it was like, so all of those things. It's kind of like when you smell cookies that remind you of your childhood and it just brings back good feelings. The same things happen in relationships. So you can use those things to start to get each other's bodies prepared, and she'll be more turned on. But if he just comes home from work, does his like normal whatever, and then all of a sudden just wants to have sex and there's no foreplay, she's not going to be prepared. And then her desire is going to diminish, and then her body's going to remember that there wasn't a lot of attention shown in the beginning, or like repeatedly for a certain amount of time. So it builds up some walls, and there could be even resentment. And then when there's resentment, there's not going to be desire, there's not going to be passion, there's not going to be openness. So it's being intentional with what your sex life actually looks like. And I know plenty of women that also can detach emotions from it. So it goes both ways, and it's understanding each other without the stereotypes of what men and women should or should not be, and being like, understand her body. If you as a man like want to know, like, understand her body, because what works for the girl that you may be seeing now could be completely different than the woman that you were just dating. So it's like, what does she need to feel safe? The more a woman feels safe, the more open she'll be, right? In all of the ways. A man needs to feel safe in a different way. So she wants to be safe in like the emotional held, capable of opening, where he wants to feel safe that he's not going to be judged. And she does as well. It just lands different. But he wants to know that he is essentially good enough and capable, because there's a ton of stigma around what we all need to be in order to have good sex. Women need to have tiny waist, big boobs, big bum, and now big lips, right? And men need to be tall and jacked and make lots of money and also be well endowed. Well, it may look good, but that doesn't mean you're at all connected and good. You know what I mean? Like, what makes sex good is to be connected to the other person and to have a willingness to play and explore and learn each other. And sometimes that's as simple as missionary. Missionary can be great. It doesn't have to be like some BDSM elaborate experience. And maybe it
50,
does.
50 Shades of Gray.
Yeah, it does not have to be that way. There was a study done, and there was, I think it was like 30,000 women, and they asked like what was their favorite position, and it was starfish. And they all were anonymous. So they're like, if you anonymously get to
Isn't
say
that
what
just where you're like a corpse lying on the bed?
pretty much, yeah.
That's
And
the saddest thing I've heard in a long time.
but
Like,
the thing is, it's actually not, because we have been programmed to believe that it is. And the reason why they said that they liked it is because they didn't have to think about anything. They could actually just be there and feel what it felt like to be with their partner. The funny thing is they did the reverse and asked the man based on those results, and and it was all anonymous because we know that people would not answer truthfully if it wasn't. The men actually said, when that was happening, I loved it, because he could tell that his woman was feeling everything and she was so into it. I think when it becomes a problem is when she's just lying there because she's scared and like,
yeah, I was thinking more like she's
or
not into it. She's just like, just this corpse that's just lying
right,
there going
right,
through the motions.
totally. So it's how we get caught up in like stigmas and stuff as well, that it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be something super simple, and like missionary, make eye contact. Like even that will help you connect to each other versus just going through the motions. But foreplay is massive, and that's the only difference, is it doesn't take men as long to become aroused, and that there needs to be effort put into to create arousal in your woman. And that sometimes is a long foreplay session, but sometimes it's also messaging her something delicious as you're on your way home, or bringing her something that you know she loves, something that shows that you're paying her attention and that you're putting in effort, and it's different for every woman. And that's where I guess with what you're talking about is also understanding the love languages, right? If quality time is her love language and you don't spend any quality time with her, you're always busy or occupied, I can tell you that's going to impact how she is sexually, because she's not open, because she's not feeling loved in the relationship. So it's all connected. It's all connected. And it sounds confusing in the beginning, but once you start to understand it, you're like, wow, this is actually so much easier. It's that it's been convoluted in so many other ways that it sounds complicated. And because there's so much shame and stigma around it, that owning some of these things is tough, because we just want to believe that we know how, like, we're great, right? Like trying to get a man that can admit, actually, I'm not very great in bed. Now that I go through this, I learned that I'm actually very much like goal oriented and in my head and all these things. That's a tough thing for a man to like accept about himself. And then he has to learn how to be with a woman in a completely different way. You can do it though, I promise.